Welcome to Status Update, the social media and creator podcast that you can listen to whilst you're working, because this is a work podcast. I'm Stevie Johnson, MD of Disrupt and ex-television personality. As always today, I am joined by my friend, colleague, and the voice of Gen Z, Jake Crabb.
Hi, I'm Jake. You probably don't know me yet, but hopefully in time you will.
Today's guest is an accidental activist who co-founded Reclaim These Streets. She's a creative powerhouse and a Philadelphia Eagles superfan. It's Jamie Klingler. And in this episode, we cover...
When Sarah Everard went missing, I tweeted that I would put on a vigil. If something lights my fire, you don't want to be around me for the next 4 hours.
If I'm not willing in my stage in life to embrace that weirdness, is that then a hindrance for me?
My best friend's grandmother absolutely adored The Rock.
So whether you're on your commute, you're at work, taking your break, jump in. This is Status Update. Hi, Jamie. Welcome. Thank you for coming on. This is going to be a very interesting next 30 to 40 minutes, I think, which can go in a ton of different directions, which is wonderful. So we'll try and cover a lot of ground. I've got to know you over the last year. You're very punchy. You're direct. I love it. It's going to be great for this. Hopefully you don't hold me to account too much. But there's lots that we can talk about, Jamie. You're a writer, you're a creative, you're an activist, speaker, and so on. One of the things I think is worth starting with is a theme that you talk about quite a lot, and it was in the TEDx talk that you did, all about reclaiming yourself. And you've said that the most valuable investment a person can make is in themselves, which we absolutely love. So does this stand true for all of us, both in personal and professional life?
I just think that we so often get into ruts and we forget about our possibility and potential. And we consider ourselves, now you're a dad, you do this, you come from Made in Chelsea, you know what you're known for, and you stay in that rather than thinking of yourself maybe as a creative or thinking of yourself as a writer or thinking of yourself in ways that you wouldn't necessarily have previously thought you could go. When I was at Shortlist and Stylist magazines, I was the picture girl. Annoyingly, my handle on Instagram and now Threads is still Photo Girl UK because
incredible.
of a job 15 years ago. But because I was the photo girl, it wasn't considered that I could write. And I got it in my head that I couldn't write to the standard of all the people around me writing. And now I've written for Vogue. You know, like once you stop going with what the preconceived notions of other people are, but more yourself. I've talked very, very publicly about my issues with alcohol and issues with food. And I was always going to be the drunk girl in the corner. And one of my friends, Bach, who drives me crazy a lot of the time, was like, you're the smartest person I know if you'd ever be sober. And that's a pretty damning...
That's a statement. Yeah, that is a statement.
And I don't know if he stands by it now that I am sober, but you know, I'll send him this and see what he thinks.
Yeah.
But I think when you get out of your own way, I never thought I could be a runner. I knew I was a dog girl. I knew that I came up with big ideas. I knew that I was creative, but I didn't necessarily think that I could ever not be drunk or that I could ever stop being the party girl from Camden. And I think once you, at least for me, the pandemic gave me a real opportunity to press pause on all that. And it was like, if I come out of this thing drunker, fatter, more addicted to alcohol, broker, then what's the point?
Absolutely,
and I was able to use it as a real come to Jesus moment. And I kind of changed everything. And I either burnt my life to the ground and started again. But actually, the core bits are still there. I read about a woman in Medium who kind of lost the same amount of weight I did in the same amount of time. And I lost 7 stone. Like I lost a lot of weight.
It's amazing.
In 9 months and on purpose with Noom. But she was miserable, but because she really thought that all she needed to do was lose weight to be in the center of the room and have confidence, whereas I was always in the center of the room. I was just a lot bigger and a lot drunker and a lot less happy. And so like you becoming skinnier didn't give me a personality and it won't, you know? And so I think I've always been a pretty powerful personality, so for good and for bad and for otherwise, and always been I've lived my life on social very, very publicly for the past 17 years, 14 years.
One of the things actually we didn't touch on, which we always do as an icebreaker, and I can't believe I forgot this, you just mentioned, it reminded me talking about being on social for the last 17 years, is to think about a status that you updated back in the day when you first started using social that you now look back on and cringe. I've got a bank of them. I've already shared some on this before, but I want to hear it from you.
So most of mine were hungover girly. Like Jamie is a hungover girly.
Ooh, yeah.
But the one I was thinking about for this specifically, which was very funny, is one of my very first tweets was in the couch, which was a bar in Soho. And I was in there less than 10 minutes. And these two guys who I'd just done a shoot with, one of them, and they walked in and I was like, oh my God, you say where you are and then they just show up. I was like, this is some. And actually, it was Michael Acton Smith, who is the founder of Calm and one of my dearest friends in the world, who was the person I was shooting for Shortlist Magazine when he introduced me to Twitter.
Okay.
And he lived upstairs from the couch. So it was a very, very close being like, oh, these girls that we just met are here, like, we'll come say hello, rather than a big, that they had like a honing method to come every time people said where they were.
This is the most incredible social platform ever. Just, tweet something and people show
up.
up.
They turn up,
But what, 14 years later, and we're family now. But it's very funny to think that the first tweets were while I was on a photo shoot with him for Shortlist.
Amazing. It's so funny looking back on Twitter and how people used to use it. I used to love following an account where it was a lady was posting or had set up a Twitter account for her grandfather who thought it was a search engine like Google.
Amazing.
And it was just him typing in things, trying to get questions and not getting them, but they were just tweets. We'll have to dig it out and we'll share it as one of the links if we can find it.
Well, I think when you and I were talking a couple months ago, you didn't know MySpace Tom.
No,
and that's
I didn't.
Such a generational thing.
Yeah.
Is that
I definitely have never heard of MySpace Tom.
So MySpace Tom was the first friend everyone got on MySpace, and there's a picture of Tom.
Oh, I have heard. Yeah, I have heard.
And
of
so
that,
everyone that was the initial wave of MySpace people, all had MySpace Tom as your very first friend.
I know. I never had MySpace. I feel like I missed out on such a cultural thing.
But
it's probably before my time.
I knew what MySpace was, and as people were starting to get it, Bebo was blowing up.
That was me.
And I was all over Bebo, and you could see how many times your profile was being viewed. So if you put up like a great photo of yourself, then all of a sudden.
So I remember Bebo in high school. No one understood what mutual friend meant, right? And on Bebo, you had your top mutual friends on your profile, and everyone was going around going, "Why have you not added me to your like mutual friends list?" Because obviously they didn't realize the concept of like just friends in common. And I remember having a heated debate with someone about why they hadn't added me to their mutual friends list.
Yeah.
Bebo was amazing.
Bebo was amazing. You could also have, and I think they took this from MySpace, is your like favorite song playing at the time. And I was going through my emo phase when I was on Bebo, so there's a lot of Panic at the Disco, Fall Out Boy, great bands. But
I think mine was Soldier Boy, Superman. Seems to remember, but hey, it was a long time ago.
Gosh, yeah. Your life has changed dramatically over the last 3 years, more so than other people that we have on this podcast, who it's more of a long-winded journey. Whereas for you, it's been, incredibly dramatic, that change. You mentioned about the weight loss and turning your life around during the pandemic. There was also another big event that happened in the pandemic, which has kind of led you to where you are today. You call yourself an accidental activist. Tell the listeners a little bit more about that.
In March of 2021, when Sarah Everard went missing, we were in lockdown. And I think the particular circumstances and that we were all watching the news 24/7, and because of Clapham and because we all knew somebody that knew Sarah because of being in the media, I was watching constantly. And tragically, when Sarah's body was found, I tweeted that I would put on a vigil. And little did I know that a tweet would change the rest of my life for me. Basically, I tweeted, I was put in touch with two local women that were doing the same. Reclaim These Streets was founded that night. And they were two counselors. So they had been in touch with local Lambeth police that were saying, obviously there's COVID rules, but we will find a way to police this. And then the next day, the police banned us from having a vigil. So I went from holding a moment of silence for a young woman who was abducted, raped, and killed by a serving police officer, Wayne Couzens, to fighting the police for my human right to protest, along with other women. And honestly, it meant that the next 18 months of our lives became a really extended episode of the thick of it. But basically, we sued the Metropolitan Police for our human right to protest. We raised $600,000 for women and girls groups. And based on all of the antagonistic behavior by the police, I ended up in front of a camera for the first time and found out that I was really good at it and really enjoyed the sparring and being able to be a normal woman holding the power to account. We won. We beat the Metropolitan Police in high court over them violating our human right to protest. And basically, it compelled me to be an advocate and a campaigner for women's safety and police reform for the last 2.5 years now, which is absolutely
Wow.
crazy. I hadn't
Yeah.
been to a protest.
That's great.
Yeah.
That is
In 20
crazy. Yeah.
years.
I almost wish we had a live audience so everyone could stand and applaud that.
Yeah, genuinely.
No, incredible, Jamie. And we haven't been doing this long. It's the first time I've had goosebumps sat interviewing someone on the sofa.
It's a powerful story.
And listening to it. And I think you said about, Sarah and it hitting home for a lot of people. I'm a man, so I maybe can't see it just as much, but my wife is a early 30-something-old person that lives in London, southwest London, just down the road from Clapham. And it could have been anyone.
And the whole thing was, for me, and coming off of a very long history of drinking way too much and partying way too much, she had done everything right. And the million of times I got home unscathed, and that we all deserve it. And we just take for granted that we're texting when we get home. And so the vigil was meant to be for all women that have experienced violence at the hands of men. And really just a moment to show rage. And instead of giving us that moment, had they let us just have the vigil, we would have gone back to our lives on Sunday.
Yeah.
I did a vigil because I ran an events company and I knew how to make a safe space. I know that I've talked to a bunch of people about this before, about the accidental activism, but I stood up and was counted because I was no longer drinking and because I had the skills to do it. And actually, I find it a huge responsibility, the women that can't stand up and can't go on, and my ability to take those experiences and share them with not only the police, but the media, and really speak for the women that can't go on camera and can't fight back because they've spent their whole lives fighting behind closed doors. I find that really scary, but really important.
I think it's almost poetic in a way that, the world went through this global pandemic. It led you to make the decision to give up drinking, trying to turn your life around almost. And ultimately, that led you to do the vigil for Sarah, which has now led you to speaking up for so many women across the country, doing all these amazing things. It's crazy how the dominoes have fallen from one terribly bad thing across the world has led you to doing so much good.
It is. And it does bring me back to what Box said about me being a really smart person if I ever got out of my own way. And that's part of it, is like, I am so busy now and so poor compared to what I was when I was like running National Burger Day and working in magazines, but waking up with purpose, never waking up with a hangover, and actually caring about everything, having a moral compass, having a moral code. It's a lot more complicated, but I don't wake up with any shame. And I really know who I am. I know what I'm going for. And actually, we've done a lot of ideas sessions recently. There's not anything clouding it. Like I can walk into a room, hear an idea, and I won't work for companies anymore that I don't think have the for good part. Sure. I won't work with companies that I don't think have purpose. But also, I don't have all this other baggage or all this other worry about what people are thinking about it, or am I a good enough person, or am I doing this right, or what are they going to do this? What am I going to do this? I literally have freed years off of my life and off of my body, and actually learning to run, learning to have some mindfulness. I'm not very good at sleeping still, but having better habits and being liking myself a lot more means the creative process is a lot easier and a lot snarkier, because I'm not worried about what people are going to throw back at me. Like, oh, you think you're so you're so worthy.
But just on that mindfulness point, I want to read something out here, because as part of doing research for this, I came across it. There was a study by Henriksen last year who observed that mindfulness practice can help artists and creatives develop ability to notice streaming thoughts, judgments, and emotional states, all of which influence their creative experience, which I think ties in really nicely to what you've just said there. We're going to focus quite heavily on some creative techniques, your creative process in a bit, but just going back to some of the activism and what you've been doing there. Has anything changed really? Because I've read stuff in reports and things online, how in November 2022 there was a hotline set up to report abusive police behavior. All of these things trying to change. So Mark Rowley's obviously come in and tried to change what Dame Cressida Dick was doing. But is there...
But all of it has been really, really PR-led.
Yeah.
And so setting up a hotline to report bad cops, and then on the other hand saying, but you can't get rid of bad cops because you don't have that power. Then don't set up the hotline until you have that power.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I cut through all the time but let's go to the next step of this. Let's think about this. And actually I am midway through the interview process for the London Policing Board.
Wow.
Which to go from a tweet about a vigil to actually applying for the mayor's office's London policing board as a paid position on a board
Yeah, quite the
is
journey.
mind-blowing for me too.
It's quite the journey, yeah.
And I was terrified. Like I was going into a panel interview, and it was the Thursday before, and I've earned my seat at that table.
100%.
And then the Thursday before, I absolutely was shitting it. I was so upset, and I was like, oh my God, and I really don't do imposter syndrome. I'm from Philly. I'm pretty ballsy. I'm pretty, and it really got to me. And so I messaged Nigella.
Okay.
And I was just like, I have the fear and I'm so scared. And you're the most high profile woman I know. Like, what do you do when you get the fear? And she was absolutely brilliant. She's like, I know you can do this, but the only people that don't have fear are grifters. Like, show up, be authentic. Like, the fear is part of this process, but you absolutely earned your place in that room. And you know that, but just, you've got to live through the fear and just do your best and really be yourself.
Yeah.
And actually I went and I chopped off all my hair as like a sleek haircut to be armor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I wrote her with a picture of my haircut and said, I'm doing it. And she was so helpful and so gracious to give me that. And she's like, you've got this, And sometimes it's really weird things like that. But like, we all get the fear. And no matter how polished people come off, like sometimes going and being like, I feel like a little girl. And what's happened, like when we were in court against the Met, those are the moments that I want my mom the most. And my mom was sick for 7 years prior to the pandemic and died prior to the pandemic. But those are the moments where you just want your mommy.
Yeah.
And you really want to tap into, she's got my back. So for my TED, I wore the last dregs of my mom's lipstick. And, and
it's little things like that, isn't it? That just make you feel like they're there with you.
And I actually, the dress that I wore for my TED has a cape on it. And then the speech was mostly written about growing my superhero cape. The dress came before the speach.
Okay. Did the dress influence the speech?
100%. Like half the speech is about the cape.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's a dress. But it's things like that I stood on my mom's shoulders to do it. Yeah. And so much, my mom was like, such an activist. And I was like, oh no, I'm partying in Europe. I'm doing this, that, and the other thing. And she was constantly critical that I didn't have enough purpose and I didn't have enough focus. And she'd be thrilled. Yeah. Like she would be so thrilled with the turns my life has taken now.
Just quickly, the stand on my shoulders saying, my dad says that to me.
Does he?
And has said it my whole life. And That's when you're younger, and Dad, you're probably listening, but when you're younger, it's a little bit annoying. You feel like your parents are hassling you. And the older and more mature I've got, the more I absolutely adore that saying. And him, building that foundation for me to then go on. And the fact that you just said, I don't think I've ever heard anyone else say it, Jamie. Oh. So
my dad's was "Don't make me go Philly on your ass," which I also use so quite often. It was on the shirt. Somebody sent it on the shirt. That's on the cover when I left Stylist is "Don't make me go Philly on your ass." I'm like the world's worst anti-violence campaigner because I want to beat up everyone all the time.
So good. We're desperate to speak to you about creativity. I think there's a lot of value for our listeners of the podcast to tap into this. You've had 20 years in it, TV and film, media and events. Why do you think your career and the different roles that you've had been so underpinned by creativity?
Because I don't have much fear. Like I'm pretty audacious and like you don't ask and you don't get. Like I'm not worried about people ignoring me or saying no. And so I kind of will do anything. Yeah. And like if you're willing to take big punts, you get big wins. Yeah. I know I've shown you the video, but my best friend's grandmother absolutely adored The Rock. And it was like, she just loved The Rock. And we were 15 and she would wear Rock sweatshirts. And she was old then, but when she was turning 100, I was like, I put it out into the universe that I needed The Rock to sing happy birthday to her. And he answered me and it got 24 million views. And it's the best video of all time because she's a riot and she's like, I love you right back. You rock you. Oh my God, she's nuts. But also she then lived to 103 and he did it every year.
Really?
And it's the nicest, but it's the juxtaposition of why would this 100-year-old woman adore The Rock? Like you need things like lean into weird, lean into passions. Like it's absolutely nuts that all these women follow me for women's safety stuff. And then the entire autumn is me being a rampant Eagles fan at 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like and me leaving Passyunk Avenue to go do LBC on the street outside of Passyunk Avenue and then running back inside. Like, but if you're normal, then you should be in a normal career that works 9 to 5 that's nameless. If you're weird, you have to do something like media stuff so that your weirdness gets accelerated and gets praise, because otherwise you're just the jerk at work that doesn't fit in and you never are happy because it's not something that's valued.
So yeah, embracing weird, it's a theme that is touched upon in other podcasts as well, which I love. So I mean, to get philosophical for a moment, then I think I know the answer to this now. But do you believe creativity is an innate quality, or is it nurtured and developed over time, or is it just embracing weird?
I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
I think you only embrace it if it's praised and if it's cultivated. I've been coaching a young woman who has some body issues and has some confidence issues, and was asking me to really go back and dissect why I was confident. And it's not something I've ever really thought about. And then I really went back, and both my best friend from when I was 11 and I are both like, oh, we're going to be president. We'll be, unless we started smoking weed or whatever. But there were no holds barred. We were the little girls at baseball doing box scores and showing men that we could do anything. And because Megan and I think, had each other, that anybody else that thought we were weird, we were like, we're the coolest thing in the world because we have each other. And that insular bit, and she's still my best friend, 35 years later. I think that and our parents being like, go for it. Like, whatever you want to do. If you want to be a gymnast, if you want to play softball, if you want to try to play softball while being a gymnast at the same time on the same beam, like, whatever, you're weird. But like, if weird and like being a bookworm is celebrated, like any path I wanted to take was always like, she's not normal. She doesn't act like anyone else, but at least she's funny when she does it. Yeah. And like treating creativity like that. And like books for me are my thing. Like books have been my lifelong partner in crime, and the way I access empathy and the way I access experiences. But the confidence to take those ideas and be like, oh, we should do an egg drop for a brunch. Like, so many of my ideas over here are just things I did in childhood in America. And the obsession with American stuff here, I can just like repackage it and people think I'm a genius.
How have things like technologies like AI, has that impacted your creativity at all? Is it helpful? Is it a hindrance?
No, not really for me yet.
Yeah.
Like, there's been some crazy articles written about me that are AI generated where I'm like, I was like, I don't talk about my mom, and I'm like, everything's about my mom. But like, there's things like that I see, but I don't see anybody yet coming up with things or the juxtapositions the way that I thread concepts together.
Okay.
So I'm not scared of it.
No.
I'm not worried anyone's gonna be me, because like there's not other humans being me, let alone machines being me right now.
Absolutely,
you
for
are,
sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
I can vouch for that.
You're one of a kind.
Very, very unique for individuals, and I probably put myself in this bracket, who are maybe too nervous to embrace their weirdness. You know, for me, I like to think I'm a creative individual. I then sit on a sofa with you and meet other people in work, and I'm like, maybe I'm not that creative, but in my family with lawyers and bankers, like, I'm definitely the most creative one. I'm also left-handed, but you know, if I'm not willing in my stage in life to embrace that weirdness and I want to be a little bit more normal, is that then a hindrance for me in my role?
No, like, I was a photo director for a while, and I don't shoot. I just surround myself with people that are really, really good at what they do.
Yeah.
And like recognizing talent in other people and letting them shine and celebrating them, that's the best thing ever. Like when you collaborate with brilliant people and when you recognize it and you let them, you take off the barriers for them being too square. Yeah. That's part of the battle. Like, you've just promoted him, who's done an amazing job with your social and stuff, and promoting good people that have an eye, that have a craft. Like, when you recognize and you recognize young people that need to have their ties loosened and to say, go for it. Like, and you're gonna screw up. But if you allow people the breadth to screw up and to succeed, you look better. I'm never threatened by anyone around me, because what's the point? Like, anyone that I work with that looks good makes me look amazing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I miss about an office, is like, I'll come up with something and then they'll play with it and they'll make it so much better. And that's kind of the fun bit.
Absolutely.
And that's the bit I worry about us not teaching juniors, because the water cooler stuff, like, you and I have sat, Stevie, you and I have sat through some some interesting creative sessions where I'll go home and I'll be like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then I do the worst thing ever is I give him all the ideas without ever being like, oh, this is my day rate for them. But I'm so bad at doing that because once I'm off on a tear, I just really like to share interesting ideas.
And my WhatsApp blows up as soon as we've had a creative session.
I really should like put boundaries on stuff. But that's when, if something lights my fire, you don't want to be around me for the next 4 hours because it's hours
just go.
And half of them don't make sense, but there's nuggets in there that do. And when those nuggets pique someone else's curiosity,
there's definitely magic to going off on a tangent. 100%. You
and
can
my whole
start
life
at point
is
A and end at point Z. Yeah.
Like I invented National Burger Day on my birthday for Shortlist or for Mr. Hyde.
That's
and
very
a friend of mine was like, you really need to get like a separate phone for business. You need a separate account for this, a separate account for this. And then my best friend was like, you've never had any boundaries. As soon as you don't take it personally, you don't care. And that's the thing is if I'm not writing you at 2 a.m, crazy ideas about whatever pitch it is, then I'm not the right person for that pitch. And like, I absolutely know when my fizzy bits go, that's the exciting part for me. And and when I want to share ideas and I want them improved upon, I never have an idea that I'm like, oh, bow tied, let's go, it's done. Because it can always be made better, especially by people that have an entirely different way of looking at it. And we've done some disastrous ones. We did a Burger Day thing where we had a tweet wall at one of the first ones, and it's August 27th. It's late till like 10 p.m. We spent a lot of money on something that nobody saw because you just couldn't see the wall at all.
Yeah.
And this was before tweet walls were then people trashing whatever it was so that you could watch it
just
in
got
real
on it to
time.
hate,
Right. But it's things like that like the freedom to make mistakes. I don't think we give youngins enough freedom to make mistakes now because everyone's worried like, oh, what if that looks bad? Or what if we get canceled for this? We all need to screw up. We need to trip. We need to fail.
So I think that's a perfect answer for my next question, which was going to be, if you had a singular piece of advice to give to brands or marketers who struggle to inject, creativity at scale and come up with these, amazing ideas that you do you think it's literally just let people go? Just let people run wild with it? Or is there something more?
I think run wild is dangerous if you don't trust the people that are running wild.
Very true.
Running wild, I think, and for me, a lot of running wild has to be that you trust the people, but also that they don't want to punch down. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where comedy and stuff ends in cancellation is I never want to be mean. Like I never want to hurt people's feelings.
Yeah. And
I think language is constantly evolving. There was a Samsung ad that had a woman like running at 2 a.m.
Oh, this is awful, yeah.
And it was right after a young Northern Irish woman was killed running at 4 p.m. And I had tweeted that it was tone deaf. And then I gave an interview to The Wire saying it was tone deaf. And a man wrote in and explained to me all of the ways that deaf is synonymous with stupid and ignorant. And that the term tone deaf is painful for deaf people. And I was like, I had not heard that before. And I can change my language. I can update my language, but it's going to be in every single paper tomorrow with my name next to tone deaf. And there's nothing I can do about it. So I don't want to tell you that I'm listening to you. And then you see that tomorrow and you just think that I'm full of it. But I tweeted about learning that. And I've never used the phrase again, except in like this situation where I'm talking about that story. Sure. And I think, and what does it cost me? What does it cost me to update my language to not hurt people? And that's the thing is there's going to be things I've made a ton of mistakes in activism. Oh my God. And then some taking credit for things I shouldn't have taken credit for. And there's always going to be times that we learn from our mistakes, but we can also really, really learn from different generations of people. Like I've got a lot of women that are a lot older than me. I definitely crave a whole lot of mom validation. So I crave women that are older than me. But I also have learned so much from young women I met at Digital Disruptors, which Stevie and I did. I had a young woman who was incredible, who then came and did spoken word for me, Ethel, at the UN Women UK Awards, and actually being able to bring her, and I coached her through the whole thing. And it was based on my TED coaching that I had gotten from my coach, Tara. And again, it's the standing on shoulders thing. Whereas as soon as we were doing that, I was like, Ethel, the most important thing you take out of this event is that you put on every CV that you spoke at a UN women event. And like, you use me as a reference and you get everything you can out of that. But like, when we were doing that, I was asking for her like bio, and she told me her height and her birthday. And I was like, and then I asked her some of her interests, and I wrote it up, and she's like, you make me sound so important. And I was like, babe, you are important.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't think we're making young people feel important or feel that their weird matters or feel, and that's where creativity comes from, is really leaning into weird and letting kids be weird. And when we make it too traditional and we make it too standardized and we don't have enough time for play, that's where we don't get the genius. And we've got to let all kinds of kids flourish if we're going to do well. It's all about causing mayhem a little bit.
Yeah.
Like the reason I did a little bit of work for Beano, I tried to get tried to get Dreams to do the world's biggest mattress in the courtyard of the V&A so that everyone could jump on it. I got as far as the Dream CEO, and then they said it would be incredibly expensive and crazy.
And dangerous, probably.
Oh, of course. I am not the person to come forward for health and safety. Like,
I've got a degree in health and safety.
Oh, great.
So if you ever
You and I. But also know your strengths. Like you and I getting together and coming up with ideas is really good because like you're my comm man to me being like,
I am. Yeah.
And it really it acts as a muse, you know?
It works.
Absolutely.
It really works. And when you find those partnerships that you spark off of, use them and exploit them and keep using them. Even if I'm on a different project, I could call you and be like, oh, I'm thinking about this. And you'd be happy to spar with me.
Definitely. Yeah.
And that's the thing is when you find people that are good at what they do, that you respect, have those conversations, but seek out bosses that let you do your thing and really compel you to be smarter and more disruptive.
The man himself. I mean,
Jake's pointing at me. For anyone that's
for anyone who's
listening
just
and
listening,
watching.
I'm putting a sleevey. You know, during my time at Disrupt, you've let me work with complete autonomy, and that's been good.
Yeah, it was, you know,
and Disrupt is coming on leaps and bounds because of it. Yeah. And that's the thing is, people that don't think they look better because their team does better are in the wrong industry. You should not be in creative industries if you don't bounce off of other people. And I can be a slave driver. Like I can be really, really difficult when I want things done a certain way. And my finding Heather, who was my business partner for Seafood Festival, was like the best thing in the world because we really, I would say crazy things like, oh, we're hiring mermaids and putting them in the Thames. And she would be like, we're putting them in the water fixtures, but we hired mermaids, you know, like, and so we can adjust things to make them work.
Sure.
But in such a fun way. And then when you actually pull off the impossible, oh my God, is there anything better?
No. We can't go this whole podcast without talking about a platform that all three of us love.
The platform formerly known as Twitter. I mean, it has been mentioned. You were obviously a massive fan of Twitter. Thoughts on the current goings on?
Oh, it's just batshit.
X?
It's just batshit. And this is what it comes down to. Elon Musk has no manners.
Yeah.
And he has run ramshot over something. Can you imagine having a brand that the world depends on, the world's governments use? And I don't know how I live. Like, I don't know how I raise the money, hold power to account. I don't know how I exist without Twitter, but I can't see it staying in the way it is because I don't want him seeing DMs. I don't want him having any money information. My God, I don't know. Like, but also I was verified because people were pretending to be me, and taking away what verified means puts me in danger.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't why I was verified. I was verified because I was gallivanting around on reality TV, but
you
know,
were who you said you were.
I was who I said I was, and I also had a lot of people that would pretend to be me, whether it was on Twitter or even dating apps and so on. So it is a little bit scary. Obviously, I'm still hurt that I'm not verified anymore. But as a platform, it was my favorite. And we work in social. Disrupt, we run social media campaigns, influencer, brand campaigns, everything. And I would always say to clients, my favorite platform is Twitter. And I'm not saying that they need to use Twitter, but for me, as a social media expert, social native, Twitter was my jam for 10 years.
I tweeted about a vigil on Wednesday. On Thursday morning, the police said no. On Thursday night, we raised £45,000. And on Friday, we got our human rights lawyers on Twitter. And on Friday, we were in high court. Yeah. You know, like Harriet Hart, you know, like Twitter changed my life so incredibly.
You obviously use the audience, the incredible audience that you built online and social media for good. Is there a frustration sometimes when you look at maybe more traditional influencers and so on that aren't really using their voice to put out good messages and to try and make a difference and a change like you have. And I'd probably include myself in that because I don't do a huge amount of that.
I think everyone's trying to do their thing and get along and be happy. You know, like I don't hold them to account. I am very annoyed that like I work harder than I've ever worked and I actually make more of an impact and I'm like poorer than I've ever been in my life. Like that's insane.
Yeah.
The fact that I can't get paid for actually doing the work I do, that's so much more important than Burger Day. But you know what? I am so much happier and I like myself a lot more. So I'll figure out the money stuff. But it's all ended up in a much better and a much more creative place.
Love that.
You've reclaimed yourself.
Big time.
And just to round out the podcast on that note, what's one singular piece of advice that you would give to someone out there listening on how to reclaim themselves, whether it be in their personal or their professional lives?
If you think you have a drinking problem, you can quit. I was drinking 2 to 3 bottles of wine a day for many years and was in a dark place, and I stopped. And that domino of anything else changed everything else for the rest of my life. And in a year, I literally, like the scale clock says that I gained 10 years of my life back. And you can't want to do that if you don't want those 10 years back. But me quitting drinking is the most influential thing. And so much of the culture here is around drinking. So I don't pretend it was easy, but I'm now 3+ years. And it's honestly, everything that came after it is down to that decision.
Yeah.
Jamie, it's been an incredible session with you. We've covered so much. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for updating your status with us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and wish you all the best in the future.
Guys, thank you so much for updating your status with us today. Speaking with Jamie has been incredibly inspiring. If you've enjoyed today's episode of Status Update, why not follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you found today's discussion insightful, share it with your friends or colleagues to keep them in the loop. Once again, thanks for stopping by for this episode of Status Update. We'll see you in the next one.